Okay, juniors, third and final part of ACT info slash practice questions, whatever. We're talking math strategies on how to guess strategically and do some stuff like that on the math part. Okay, so pacing. We've talked about how math is 60 questions, 60 minutes, but not necessarily, it says not just 1 minute per question. So less on easy questions, more on hard questions. If you're shooting for less than a 22, I don't know if you guys have taken the ACT before. Have you taken the ACT before? Yes, you have? Okay. If you're shooting for less than 22 to raise your score to about a 22, focus on the first 45 to 50 questions. Don't even look at the last 10. Put all your time and energy into 45 to 50 questions and then guess on the remaining. Make sure you fill in all the questions, but there's that. All right, if you are looking at a 22 plus and you are typically one of those people who run out of time. So if you already have a composite score or a math score above a 22, but you usually run out of time, skip questions according to the 15-second rule. And here's the 15-second rule. I think I talked about this the other day when we were doing ACT. If you don't have a strategy in the first 15 seconds, skip it. So if you're looking at a problem and it takes you 15 seconds before you even figure out what to do with the problem, skip that question and move on to the next one. Okay, you can maybe bubble in an answer of what you think might be the correct answer, but skip it and move on to something else that would take less time for you. Okay, if you have a 22 plus and you usually don't have a time crunch, like you get to the end and you have all the questions filled in, why not spend the full however long on each question? So none of those strategies apply to you if you don't have a time crunch. Okay, but typically juniors, usually that's the hardest part. Okay, should I use my calculator, and if so, how often? Are you listening to this, juniors? You should only use your calculator on 30 to 50% of questions. That's like 1 in every 3 to like every other question. If you are using your calculator on every single question, you're using it too often. Do some stuff in your head. I guarantee you're like, but the calculator is faster. No, it's not. If you do some stuff in your head, you can actually do it faster, right? Like one of the things that we were doing in geometry today, we were finding surface area, and it was like 2 pi RH is what we were doing, okay? And the radius was 5 and the height was like 6 or something like that, right? Can you take 2 times 5 times 6 in your head? No. You should be able to. What's 2 times 5? 10 times 6 is 60. And 60 pi is probably going to be one of the answers because they don't have you multiply pi out a lot of the time on the ACT. Okay? Do that stuff in your head. Don't use a calculator for that, okay? You can do that stuff in your head. It really does go faster if you do some of those easier computations in your head. All right. Should I solve for the answer or start with some of the answer choices? Here is a strategy for plugging in answers, all right? I start with a really easy question. Of course, we know how to solve this, right? If I'm solving for x plus 3 equals 9, okay? All right, you would subtract the 3, and we know the answer is 6, so we know the answer is D. Okay, but let's say we don't know how to solve that, and we are going to use the strategy of plugging numbers in, right? Okay, so this is like a strategy to use on a harder question where you're plugging numbers in. Here's what you do, okay? If you start, all of the answers on the ACT, by the way, A through E, will all be listed in numerical order, right? Like 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, they go in order, right? Okay? So sometimes the answer will be 3, sometimes the answer will be 7, but all of the answer choices will be listed in order. So here's the deal. We know that the correct answer is D. If you start by plugging in 3 plus 3 is 6. That doesn't work, so we know 3 doesn't work. Then you plug in B. We know that doesn't work. Then you plug in C. That one doesn't work. Then you plug in D. Oh, yeah, that one does work. You will have plugged in 4 numbers and wasted time plugging in 4 things. True? Ooh. So this is plugging in 4. If we started from the top, we plug in 4. Okay, that's wasting our time by 4 plugins, right? Versus, here's what we do. Instead, if you are deciding to plug in number choices, start with the middle one. Okay, so what I do is I'm going to plug in 5. And 5 plus 3 equals 9. That is not true. We are 8. Right? 8 is not equal to 9. So we know that 5 doesn't work, right? So what I'm going to do, and I'm only 1 away, right? So looking at what I had, I am at 8 and I will need to be at a 9. I know the answer is either B or it's D because I'm 1 unit away, right? I'm not very far away from the correct answer. So even if I go the wrong direction and I choose 4, 4 plus 3 equals 9. This is now 7. Now I'm farther away from the correct answer, right? But now I know that D is the correct answer. If I go by plugging in the middle answer first, and then even if I go the wrong direction, that's only plugging in 3 numbers versus the 4 I plugged in if I started from A. Got it? Okay, so that's a good strategy to do. If you're going to start plugging in numbers, start with a middle number, okay? Because I think C is most often the correct answer choice anyway. Like when you guess, they say all like guess C. Do they say that? Right? Straight line bubble C, because C is like happens more often as an answer than any of the other answer choices, right? Like, yeah. Pick C, yeah, there you go, sure. All right, should I draw a picture? You always draw a picture. If they give you something like especially right triangle trig and they say a plane is blah, 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 and here is the angle of elevate, draw a dang picture, okay? Like draw your right triangle. Here's your airplane, blah, 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 something like that, right? Draw your triangle, okay? Always draw a picture. Or if they say a circle, blah, 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 here's your circle. Draw a dang picture, okay? Should I use hypothetical numbers, okay? So like let's say they say X, let's say, I don't know, 2x is less than x squared. I have no idea, right? And they're like, in which answer choice should blah, 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 x be? Plug in some hypothetical numbers. Just make up some numbers, right? Like plug in, I always plug in 2 and 3. So start by plugging 3 in and see if that's true, right? Okay, just pick numbers and plug them in. When they're doing comparisons like that, when they have like x on either side and they have a less than or greater than symbol, okay, I would plug some hypothetical numbers in. Choose like 3 or 4 or 5 or something like that, right? Hypothetical numbers, okay? Not every question has a strategy. There's a lot of problem solving. And a lot of times they'll have like multi-step things. So if you're solving for x and y, the answer will be like the sum of them. So you have to solve for x, you have to solve for y, and then the final answer is adding them together. Find the sum of the 2 answer choices. Add them together at the end. So like it's multi-step stuff, okay? All right, I do have some information on science, if you want it. They have 6 passages for science, 6 to 7 questions per passage for science, with a total of 40 questions. There's 35 minutes to do those 40 questions. Here are the passage types. You have data representation, which is about 2 passages. Those are going to be your figures and tables, and looking at results. Research summaries, so you'll have 3 passages that are like, they researched the genetics of blue-eyed people, whatever. Here are the results of that. You're going to require deep understanding of experimental setup, so like that would be your hypothesis testing, like the 8 steps to, is that what it's, hypothesis? Okay, that's going to be in this research and summaries, okay? Did they set their hypothesis? Is their conclusion their last step? That type of thing, okay? And then you have 1 passage that's conflicting viewpoints, okay? So like maybe they're debating whether redheads are dying out as a species. I don't know. Like I've heard one direction and I've heard the other. I've heard that like redheads are like no longer going to be a thing in the next 100 years, okay? But then I've heard people say, no, they'll still be around. There's just not very many of them. Okay, so conflicting viewpoints and the science that goes along with that, okay? This stuff is very text heavy. So you're looking for like context clues of things like that, okay? Passages in science do not progress in difficulty. So, like the math test, the last 10 questions are your hard ones. Science is not that way. Does not test rigorous science knowledge. It's more like investigating, like that type of thing. A lot of people can do really well on the science question or on the science test, even if they don't know their chemistry or whatever it is, right? Okay. Test writers tend to hide the correct answer. Okay, be careful with that. They tend to hide the correct answer. Sometimes they'll put the correct answer as like the longest answer choice. Okay, so be careful of that. All right, content covered by ACT math test, number and quantity. So real and complex numbers, quantities, rational numbers. Do you know what real and complex numbers are? Complex numbers are imaginary, like i's. So if you take I times I, that's I squared. Do you remember what I squared is equal to? -1, okay? So complex numbers. Rational numbers and irrational numbers. Irrational numbers would be like pi, numbers that don't terminate or repeat, okay? Algebra is like solving, graphing, modeling multiple types of expressions, systems of equations, x squared, x cubed. You know that it's a parabola versus a linear function, that type of thing. This stuff right here, holy cow. Everybody watch this. They test your knowledge of this like super crazy on the ACT in some fashion, okay? They want to know if you know the difference between this and this. Do you know which one is x to the 5th, and do you know which one is x to the 6th? Yeah. Which one is x to the 5th? The top one is x to the 5th. This bottom one right here, when you're taking something to the 3rd power, that means you're multiplying it by itself 3 times. So that one is x to the 6th power, okay? But that shows up somehow hidden somewhere on the ACT at least once or twice. Hello, dear.
Can I get Josie's 6.2?
Josie's probably listening to this right now.
Okay.
You're fine. Yes, come here. Let me see where we're at here. She needs